Hello and welcome back to another interview with Bruce de la Cruz. I'm a journalist with TBC 22, and today I am interviewing Stéphane Parisien, the Chief Administrative Officer of Prescott-Russell. And today we will be talking about the new Prescott-Russell Residence. Yeah, so tell us how are you doing today, Mr. Parisien?
I'm doing fine, thank you. It was a great moment that we went through yesterday with the groundbreaking ceremony, and we're really happy to get this moving forward.
Tell us how that was. This was might be the first ever recorded virtual groundbreaking. So kind of tell us how that experience went yesterday.
Well, it was sort of odd, as you know, and we've done a number of press conferences in the past for numerous events. And because of the pandemic, we could not, first of all, do the groundbreaking ceremony at the site itself. We could not do it the day the construction officially started, which was early February, because of the weather and the restrictions on meeting together outside. So first, we had to wait till middle March to take the actual photo. And then a week later, we did the groundbreaking ceremony virtually. We normally would have between 50 and 100 people on the site, and a face-to-face event like this, it's very much different than doing it virtually when you only have 5 or 6 people that show up on the screen and you're unaware of how many are actually joining the event live. So it was a first. We're happy to do it. As I said yesterday, it was a bright sunny day. Wish we had been outside, but the sun was in our hearts, and we had a great moment. So definitely odd, but you know what? It is 2021, and we're in this pandemic still.
No, it's fantastic. I mean, at least it was still able to get done in the first place. So just kind of rolling into things. So this is a brand new residence. Can you tell us why we need a new one?
The ministry a few years back made requirements or changes to the legislation, and a facility like ours has been there since the 70s. So it's, in essence, it's 50 years old. So it no longer meets the requirements for the residents that are under our care. Some 50 years ago, the residents that were at the Prescott-Russell building came in on both their feet and were autonomous. Nowadays, almost 80% of our residents need 24/7 care, and the building is no longer suited to serve the needs of our residents. So there was a requirement put in place that we needed to build a new long-term care facility by the end of 2025. And given the size of this project, the amount of money involved, you can imagine that it's a 3 to 5 year commitment just in the planning and moving things forward. So we had to do it. The deadline was 2025, and we're going to be ready by the end of 2023.
Can you go into a little more detail about why the building is no longer sufficient?
Well, this building does not have an actual HVAC system with air being conducted through a conduit. It's actually a lot of electrical units on the wall. We don't have a central air conditioning unit. We have it in one part of the building, but in all the residents' rooms, those are all the standalone units that are put in the windows. We're not also supposed to open the windows to keep the quality of air. So the building is kind of old. It requires a lot of upkeep in terms of capital investment. In terms of organization, it doesn't really meet the needs of the residents, being some of them bedridden and having some of our staff doing rounds. So we're trying to do small circles so that staff can do a full closed loop, see all of the rooms. So a bunch of requirements and specs that weren't there like 50 or 30 years ago that now need to be in place, because 80% of our residents can no longer take care of themselves. So it's both a physical requirement, but it's also an organizational one, which requires us to build a new facility.
So I guess just making a new addition wouldn't really cut it in terms of quality of care?
Well, it's a bit more than that. We have like 200 staff that work at the residence, not all at the same time. They work in different shifts, but we're now being asked to do more with staff, more with the same staff. So in essence, what we're trying to accomplish here is we're adding 78 new beds to our facility. We have presently a 146 bed facility, so we're going to a 224, 78 beds more. So we're trying to maintain this new facility with the addition of the new residents with the same staff complement. So by designing a new building, we're going to save on operational costs. We're going to save on heating costs, electrical, and we're also going to be saving on human resource costs because we're going to be able to have staff handle more residents given the proximity of some of the rooms and how it's all organized.
Could you go into a little more detail about that? Just how?
Well, yes, we have we now have a internal courtyard. So the building is structured in such a way where we have residence units, small residence units, as opposed to wings. In the old days, they were long wings, and staff were going from one across the dorms from one room to another, and these wings could have been like 100 feet long and whatnot. So by the time that a staff, I'm giving you an example, the time the staff goes to the other end and comes back, there's a lot of walking involved. So we're now having these units where they're shaped in a square or a circle, whereby staff can go to more rooms and waste less time by doing a full closed loop. Plus our nursing stations, because of the internal courtyards, we have glass glazing inside. So staff will be able to see a complete unit from their station from within the building because inside there is glass that surrounds the entire unit.
Okay, I see. So can you tell us where the new building will be built? It will be close to the older building, where that location?
Yeah, it is actually. It's roughly a kilometer away from the building itself. The building is in proximity to our Hawkesbury General Hospital. It's going to be located on Spence Avenue, right next to the fire hall, and it's actually closer to the hospital than it was before. And we're also going to be trying to work with the hospital to coordinate other services that may be of a possible cost reduction to both the hospital and ourselves. And having the physical location of the residents within proximity of the hospital, that's more conducive to having partnerships and providing some sort of a one-stop healthcare system with both the hospital and our long-term care facility.
And that kind of works into being more efficient with resources, I'm guessing?
Yeah, we're definitely open in trying to accomplish that. The hospital has told us that they're willing to look into that. We want to do this as well. And with the pandemic, we've learned a lot of things, and we've learned that we have to work collaboratively, especially with all the health providers, given some of the challenges we have faced throughout this ordeal.
Can you tell us how you became personally involved with the project?
Well, I've been the CAO here for, I'm in my 19th year. So I've always had the residents under my responsibilities. We do have a long-term care administrator that reports to the CAO's office. But this is just one of those projects that's the biggest one we've ever faced within the United Counties of Prescott-Russell. I was at the beginning very much involved in trying to guide council as to what needed to happen, what steps were to be taken in what time frame or timelines. I was also responsible for providing advice on hiring a project management team, hiring architects. So it's pretty much the job of the CAO to look after these things and make recommendations to council. So I was very much involved in the planning stage, which lasted almost 3 years, developing criteria for the new residents, doing lobbying at the province to get approvals for grants, planning grants, also getting approvals for the specs, our our land site approvals, getting approvals from the town of Hawkesbury as well, because we're dealing with a town, and we're a county body, and we also have to apply to the planning land uses in the same fashion a normal contractor or someone as a ratepayer would do.
Just to pedal back, when you're talking about why we need a new residence, so so what was the reason behind the ministries updating their needs and the
Well,
requirements?
the ministry was in the good old days responsible for long-term care. It still is, but it's the supervising body of all long-term care facilities for a municipally owned and run long-term care facility. So they provide funding to us.
Mm-hmm.
They provide regulation. They are there to protect the residents and their families. They're also there to dictate what can and cannot be done. And given that they put a lot of money into the pot, well, they also decide what type of a structure you need to have to operate under the Licensees Act.
Were they just kind of working off of data that's been collected during the past year during the pandemic? Is that what's kind of?
Oh no, this has been long. This has been long in the making. We've had some municipally owned homes were rebuilt in the early century. Ours is at the end of its actual life, given it's more than 50 years old. So there were a few municipally owned homes that were in the, in the 40th years, 50 years, and the ministry does multiple examinations throughout the years where they send out inspectors to look at how we conduct our business, how we provide healthcare to our residents. And it just came to a point where better building makes more sense in providing long-term care services. And they put steps in place for us to continue on building good healthcare, and new buildings are required to, that's just the cost of doing business nowadays.
You said that construction was kind of delayed because of the weather and COVID. So can you tell us where we are in the process right now?
Well, the shovel was in the ground February 1st. Right now, they've taken a lot of stone and rock out of the ground, obviously. And this week they've poured the first footings for the main building. So it's quite impressive to look at this 6-acre site with machinery that you would see in the mining sector, big trucks.
Oh yeah.
Huge excavators pulling gravel and stone out of the ground, and now pouring concrete. And we're seeing much more of what it can look like now than what it did, let's say, 2 months ago when we still had snow on the ground.
So, like, what kind of other things might delay the projects?
Well, digging, obviously, they found a bit more rock than they were anticipated, but it's still on schedule. But along the process, a number of things that could happen. And when you're dealing with a $75 million project, it could be the acquisition of material. You may have at some point to change from, we're using a lot of concrete and metal in the building as opposed to wood lumber, given it's an institutional building. But also because of this pandemic and the challenges that a lot of contractors are having in acquiring materials, it's a lot of these materials are on back order. There's a lot of demand right now. People, because they've stayed at home, have started to do renovations. So it just takes longer to get materials or equipment. It can delay as much as 6 months to a year. Actually, we had planned on having finished this building by the end of 2022. And because of the pandemic, Now we know that we're at least a year late in completing the project.
So you plan to have residents in by 2024, like
Well,
first quarter?
hopefully December 2023,
Yep.
but realistically, I would say early 2024.
Okay, I see. So kind of, were there any changes that need to be made in regards to the infrastructure when it comes to COVID-19, like say more space between beds, more room, more private rooms?
Well, that's actually a great question because when we first came up with the initial design build, um, the square footage that we came up with was actually a bit larger than what the ministry was requiring, and thus the cost associated with more square footage went up as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we figured that it's nice to have a benchmark, but sometimes you realize that you need a bit more space than what's specified for all sorts of reasons. And we came to council with our first draft, and we looked at ways where we could reduce cost, and one of them was to reduce the square footage. And we decided to stick with our proposition to at least not reduce the square footage. And then 2 months later, the pandemic hit us. And then the requirement to isolate, the requirement to have social distancing, the requirement to possibly take one wing and, isolate 15 or 20 rooms or provide buffer where some of those rooms were actually unoccupied to provide appropriate space for residents. So we're quite happy. That was a really great decision to stick to our square footage, because knowing what we know now, it wouldn't make sense to reduce the size of the building to what was initially planned.
In addition to bigger rooms, what are some of the things that the new building will improve upon the old building? More equipment, better equipment?
Better equipment, better air quality, better flow of services that are being provided to them. Many more multi-facility rooms that can be used for either the families to attend gatherings with their loved ones at the residence. It's just a state-of-the-art building, and it's something we're not having right now. So we want to provide our residents with a feel-at-home type of building where if they need to have family come over for an anniversary, a birthday, or a special celebration, that we have the rooms that are required to give them privacy and respect to hold these sessions with their families. And this is the kind of new ways of thinking to have our residents have this feel at home type of feeling, actually, which is not quite possible with what we have right now. This, like I said, is a 1970s building, so it feels like you're in a hospital, and that's the last thing we want them to feel like. A lot of our residents, this is their last home. For most of them, it's their last home. Mm-hmm. Some of them are have dementia. We have a special unit for dementia and Alzheimer's, but we also have a lot of rooms where residents require care on a 24/7 basis, whether it be for providing meals to them, helping them eat their food, changing clothes, getting in and out of diapers when that happens. So this new facility provides more dignity and more respect to them as they live their life, the late stages of their lives in that kind of a facility.
And all that you just mentioned there kind of goes into what was said yesterday during the groundbreaking, where you want to have the building feel less institutionalized.
Yes, correct. Okay. We're also wanting to have internal courtyards, because, as you know, people like to sit and look around, and they like to look outside. If you look at the building we have now, the sites are not all that great from what they have to look at. As I've said, initially that building was planned for folks that could move in and out, could do their own groceries. It was more of a retirement place, which is not now. So we're having a lot of daylight that's being provided with that building. A lot of places where they can actually go outside on a patio and look out at the traffic that's coming and going. It's a very busy part of town, I should say, and it's going to give them more. It'll be more fun for them.
During the planning stage, again, did you ask any of the residents about things that they wanted in the new building, or?
Yeah, at first we had some planning sessions. We involved residents, we involved their families, we involved the community and some of our stakeholders in trying to come up with a bunch of wants, what was their wish list? And we try to account for that wish list and to provide a package where everybody was getting a little bit of what they wanted. So yes, we did have some of those, and those were critical in trying to develop an early design. And we've also afterwards brought that back to them to see what they liked, what they didn't like. So that took about, I would say, anywhere from 2 to 4 months. As you know, we can't please everybody, but we at least try to take into account the wishes of our community, our residents, and their families.
You said there were 200 people currently working at the facility. Do you have plans to hire more? Because I know one of the most common problems nowadays with long-term care homes is that they're understaffed.
They're understaffed. Staff retention is critical, but recruitment of staff right now is really tough, and that's not only for us. This is throughout Ontario. And as you know, we're just a few hundred meters from a hospital, and that hospital also requires the same staff we do. So we're somewhat competing with the hospital to recruit new staff. So, but we think with the new building and that's not to say we're not going to hire new staff, but we think that we have the complement right now that's required to manage the new facility with more residents. So essentially, we're banking on the fact that we can do the job with the staff that we have.
Kind of looking ahead to the future, I know that some members or some patients, they don't all have family that can visit them on the daily basis. So what kind of things are you doing right now and plan to do in the future just so they don't feel left out?
We have a family council. Family council is members of the family that meet on a regular basis, and they look after providing feedback to our administration in how to look after their loved ones, but also to look at those that are alone, as you mentioned, those that don't have any family members. And we do have volunteers to help out. We never have enough. We need more for sure. But we also need to do more on the mental health issues, because with this pandemic and this isolation, a number of our residents who don't have any family were suffering a lot during the pandemic. And we also had an outbreak late last year, which lasted for almost 3 months, and we lost 15 souls.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Outbreak. And we all hear of family members who could not be with their loved ones when they were at the end of their lives, but you can imagine what it must feel like for someone to have no family at all, having to go through this. So it's been tough, and that's something we need to look at in the future, because it's been a trying period. It's tough as a human being to think of your of someone else, passing away on your own without any family members around you.
Just kind of go off my own story. My grandmother passed away last year before the pandemic. I can only say that I'm thankful that we're still able to visit her at all. It was, of course, I would have liked to have more time with her, but I think the time that she did pass away was a good time, just so we wouldn't have to feel that separation. So I understand completely.
Oh yeah, it's really tough. I my wife passed away from cancer 5 years ago, and I can only imagine having to go through that during the pandemic, how tough that would have been. And I'm so grateful that at least I had the time to spend with her at the end of her life rather than have to go through this. So I can certainly relate to those that have had issues trying to just see if their father, their mother, their aunt or a friend was doing okay, because it was a rough period for our residents, their families, but for staff as well. It was kind of tough to go through this. This is unprecedented. We've never had to go through something like that before, and I'm not so sure we won't go through it again.
Could you explain kind of how the whole transfer process will happen when it does happen, all the current residents to the new building?
Yes, well, the building has to be fully functional before we transfer any residents, and it's going to be done in phases. I would assume at that point that we're going to be using some of our land ambulances, but also non-urgent patient transfer. And the amount of patients transferred to the new facility we will be done coordinately with some of our staff members at the same time. So we're going to be running parallel shifts at the new residence and the old facility until we move everyone. But we want to make sure that when we move them, it's done with the less disturbance possible, and that we can also provide the same level of care from one place to another to ensure that they don't feel like they're being bullied into another facility. And we're going to put something in place to allow for certain measures to facilitate that move. As you can imagine, that's going to be quite a challenge for us to undertake, to move everyone to this new facility.
What in your mind makes Prescott-Russell Residence different from the other for-profit homes that are around the area, and why should we choose municipality homes?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is when you say for-profit. So we're not for-profit, which means that we're not looking at cost in the same fashion as the private sector would do. We also have the ratepayers that provide financial support, as if monies are required to make ends meet. There's a levy system in place where the counties can levy taxes to help with the increased costs at a municipal run home. I can also tell you from the waiting list management, and we do not manage the waiting list. That's being managed by the Community Access Care Center, that people are looking to have their loved ones placed in a municipal run home at least 2-to-1 versus a for-profit home. A lot of times it'll have to do with proximity, but most of the time it does to do with the level of care and service that's being provided in a not-for-profit home, because the end result is not to I'm going to sound harsh when I say this, but I'm not. The end result is not to make money. The end result is provide healthcare to people at the end of their lives. And you can't compare a municipal run home with a private one, because the mandate at the beginning is not the same.
Perfect. I think that's all the time we have. I want to thank you again, Mr. Parisien, for letting me speak to you on this matter. Do you have any closing remarks you want to say?
No, thank you. You were very, I loved your questions. You were well prepared, and I don't know, you just made me feel good. It's a good week. I'm just gonna ride the wave for now.
Thank you again. This is Cruz signing off.